be present. If we're not present, it's not going to work. So we definitely need to
Yes.
be in that place. So here we go.
Cece keeps us on our toes. Hi,
Yes.
Barry. So
Hi,
nice to
Christine.
see you.
You too.
Let's talk about dating.
Indeed, we shall.
Christine Baumgartner, and this is Barry Selby. This is Let's Talking About Dating. And we're going to be talking today about blaming and resentment because,
Oh, yes.
boy, do they go hand in hand.
And the price you pay. Oh, boy.
Always,
Yeah.
always. I mean, wow. Yeah. Well, we were just,
Even though you might think it's justified.
yes, 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 true. I remember quite a number of years ago, there was a psychologist on the radio named Dr. Tony Grant.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things she used to say was, do you want to be right or do you want to be loved?
I've heard that statement in so many forms tonight. Do you want to be right? You want to be happy? You want to be right? Or you want to be whatever it is, free?
Yes.
Yeah. Because that attachment to being right is the trap.
Yes. And blaming and resentment, we think are really justified. And we can come up with lots of reasons to justify blaming somebody. The list is so long, right?
Yeah.
Wow. And haven't we all done it? We've all done it. And, it's like, well, I get that, but I'm different. It's different. This is a different circumstance.
Right.
And
It's
I think it's important that we talk about maybe some reasons that people do it and some filters to run it through so that it's not every time. Every time we don't need to blame the other person or get all resentful about the other person. And the cost is very high.
Well, I think that's just true, and I think I've definitely got some things I can teach about resentment and its mirror, which is guilt, because they both have the same thing. It's about the formula, how that works, but also realizing just how by having blame and resentment, one, we're separating ourselves from our own loving, our own heart, but secondly, we're giving our power away. Which is one of the biggest things we don't realize we're doing. So we can definitely unearth some things for people.
Yes, and I also heard, I think. I've heard it from a number of people where they say that part of what you could be doing is you're drinking poison and expecting it to hurt the other person. That it's it's harming you.
Exactly. Yeah. The way I framed it, or was told framing it, was that resentment was two ways. One, say resentment is like holding a red hot stone and forgetting to throw it.
Yes.
The other one is taking poison, expecting the other person to die, because that sounds much more dramatic than just saying,
Yeah.
But that's the thing is, again, back to the codependency piece. We do these things hoping to affect somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And when we don't affect somebody else, we get upset. So we're actually getting upset about somebody else and then getting upset because we're not getting upset.
Yes. Yes. Isn't that
a circle of insanity? Yeah.
Very insanity. So often when I find that I've blamed people, it's when I'm not taking any responsibility for any part of it on my shoulders.
Yes.
It's all them. It's all their fault. Why did they do this to me? Why did they act like that? Why did they do that? Why did they say that? And I think it's really important to say, why did it affect me so much? Why do I care what they say so much? And I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying ask yourself that question, right? Don't you think that's a really valuable question to ask?
Absolutely. But let me say one thing at the beginning of this, because some people are going, but I don't want to give up any sense of being okay. It's like, no, here's the thing. What we're going to talk about is how you can walk away from this in a way that's healthy. Because some people say, well, if I don't judge or blame, then I won't have any reason. I won't be able to be upset with this person. That means they can get away with it. We're not talking about that. We'll explain how we change that paradigm, because it's like the idea about forgiveness is not about forgetting it ever happened.
No.
It's forgiving means you don't have to sit there and go through it again and again and again.
Yes. How do you move?
We're jumping ahead, but I want to get that piece in this. People don't go, but I can't give up blame and resentment because I wouldn't feel like I'm getting what I need to get done and have that person suffer. But that's the thing. They aren't suffering. We are.
No. And they often don't. They often don't suffer. You're the one that's suffering. And
basically, they're oblivious.
Very much.
Yeah.
Because they're just doing their thing. I mean, most of the time when I drill down, they either didn't mean to hurt my feelings or make me upset, or they didn't care. They didn't care that it upset me.
Right.
And I cared a lot. And that if I keep caring, about somebody who doesn't care about me, how sad is that? I mean, wow, that was
Right.
an eye opener when I figured that out in my 30s, because that was when I did a lot of this pivotal thinking was in my 30s. And I was like, wow, that's not working at all.
And the thing is, it's also interesting because, and this becomes a refined skill as time goes by, because I know that I definitely can do it better now, more quickly and more ably,
Yes.
having had lots of practice. So I'm not saying I'm immune to it by any means, but I'm getting better at handling it so I don't fall in the trap again. Because I used to
Yes.
do the thing every time where I spend months moping around, blaming and judging my ex-partner or my ex-girlfriend or my parents or something else. And the truth was, they were just moving on with their lives.
Mm-hmm.
They were oblivious to what was happening. Meanwhile, I was beating myself up because I didn't win or tell them or whatever it was. I was just internalizing all that upset, which is why it's such a bad thing to do. The price is so high because we're actually destroying our own immune system ultimately. If we're
Yes.
carrying on judgment, blame, resentment, and by the way, judgment is the underneath of all of this. But if we're blaming and resenting somebody else for something they did and we haven't resolved it, especially if we haven't resolved it, and we'll tell you about doing that as well, is then you're in the place where you're simply internalizing this hurt feeling as a means to intoxicate or to toxify your own system. Isn't healthy.
It's such a good point, because I also found for me, I kept feeling less adequate, less capable, less smart, less good as a person.
Right.
The more I chewed on it, the more I thought about it, the more I worked on it, the more I carried it around like this stone in my pocket, it felt depleting. And I
And
wasn't aware of it at the time.
no, and we sort of ask. We also have a habit as human beings to ask the most silly questions. Like I would say, it's like, why is this happening to me?
Yes.
Well, it's like, it isn't a why. It's like, it happened. What do you do about it?
Mm-hmm.
And so to simply sit there going, why, oh, why, oh, why? One of my teachers used to say that, the question why is like having, if you remember that when we were a kid, we used to have those the wooden bat with a ball tied by rubber band and you hit it back and forward. That's what
Yeah.
why looks like. It doesn't get you anywhere.
No.
So the idea of understanding that when something happens to you, the question you don't ask is, why did this happen to me?
Yeah.
Unless you're going to follow that up with, what do I do about it?
Yes.
Because if you get stuck in the why loop, nothing happens. It's really about, okay, this happened. What do I want to do with that?
Yes. What do I do about this instance? How do I heal from this instance? And how do I have this not happen again?
Exactly.
You can see where I was going, because we
Oh,
teach
yes.
similar things. Oh,
Exactly. Yeah.
Who wants it to happen over and over again? And if you get stuck in the, oh, poor me, and it keeps happening to me, and the victimhood, it's not going to change. You're never going to end up having a different experience at all.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the things about blame is that it's really, in some ways, the assumption we know what's going on.
Yeah.
It's like the challenge with blame, which isn't a challenge. The misunderstanding or the misperception of blame is we think that we know what somebody else should do because we think they know better.
Yes.
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 And so when we're blaming somebody, for example, we may be blaming an ex-lover because the way they abandoned us.
Yes.
But if we knew their history and their life path, we might realize that's just they're acting the way they're supposed to act because they were raised that way, because they were abandoned by their parents or whatever that was. So that trait that they're exhibiting may not be something they have control over consciously because they haven't done the work. Now, not to say you should let them off the hook to say they can do it to you again. This whole thing is you live and learn. You don't live and repeat.
Yeah. Yes.
So the understanding that blame is not something that is really valid or helpful unless you realize you're doing it. Because the thing about blame and resentment is they are hopeless as methods for living, but they're great little triggers if you catch them and go, oh, I'm going to get into blame again. Let me change course.
Yes.
Because that's the thing. I mean, I still get in resentment, I still do blame, but my time from having it happening to when I become aware of it and then changing it is much, much shorter than it used to be.
Oh, because we could go on for years before we learned how to do this better.
Oh,
And
people carry it for decades.
people listening to this are like, oh yeah, I still, am mad at that person from 20 years ago. And this is what happens to people. And what happens too is then you've never learned the tools to deal with the next person that's going to come along. Even if it's not the same person, it's the next person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and the other thing that I found that has happened with people is, I said, it's not fair to get mad at somebody for doing something you never explained to them they shouldn't do to you.
Ooh. That's like so perfectly laid out.
Yeah, because how often they should have just known.
Yeah.
they know me. Really? Have you really explained this to them? Like I've said before that my husband explained to me when we were dating that he and his son loved practical jokes. And I said loud and clear, I don't like practical jokes. I don't see any humor about them. Please don't ever do one for me. But he could have if I hadn't told him that, because it was his way of, it was really was, they thought it was very caring. It felt very caring to the two of them, he and his
Right.
adult son. It just would feel opposite to me. So because that's his normal way, I needed to say, not mine.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't have known that.
No.
And it would have hurt my feelings terribly. And if you loved me enough, you would have just known. Yes.
Exactly.
There's no way he would have known.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For me, my upbringing was, because being raised in East London in England, sarcasm was a second language to us. So that idea of communicating from a sarcastic point of view basically got me in trouble a lot when I first came into the States, because I realized just how Americans don't have sarcasm the way we do in Britain.
No.
And so it took me a while to learn how to defer and to put that on hold. With certain people, I can get away with it. My brother and I keep doing it all the time. We're on WhatsApp all the time because he's in Italy. So we keep playing that with each other, no problem. But I also know there's certain people I can do that with, and most people I can't. Mm-hmm. So recognizing that's the thing I don't get in trouble with. But I was going to say, there was a... oh, hang on. Did it go away? It'll come back. Continue on. It's okay. It'll come back.
Okay. So this is what I had said in the beginning, that you own your part. What's your part in whatever happened that you're upset about? Right. Because if you're having blame and resentment, you're upset. So right. Please, your thought came back. I could tell.
It did.
Off over your head.
My fingers too. Yeah. When I was because when you said that about your ex-husband, your widowed, your deceased husband said to you at the beginning of the relationship, what came to mind was the idea of the 5 love languages. Mm-hmm. By the way, if you're watching this and you haven't gotten Gary Chapman's book, 5 Languages, I highly recommend that book. It's one of my favorite books to recommend to clients, because it's a book that will transform your relationship with somebody else. Because what you learn is what that person's primary love language is, and your own, because most people don't know, which means that when you're in a relationship with somebody and you express love the way you think that they should receive it, but it's not the same as their love language, it'll go straight past them. Which means maybe you're realizing now that in your relationships, I know in my past ones, I didn't understand what my partner's love language was. So I might do it one way, but they wanted a different way. And by the way, the 5 love languages are quality time, physical touch, acts of service, gifts, and words of affirmation. Got them all done. That was great.
Good job.
I've practiced a while now, as I haven't said them. But the thing is, for example, so if your partner, their love language is words of affirmation, they want to hear you tell them that you love them. Whereas your love language might be physical touch, but if they don't touch you, you don't feel loved. They may tell you, because their love language is words of affirmation, they may tell you they love you, but if you don't get touched by them physically, you may not believe it. Yeah. So understanding that even that simple thing can transform the quality of a relationship, and that can stop blame and resentment even starting in your relationship. Mm-hmm. So think about love languages as well, just for the intimate relationship people.
Yes. And I have certainly gotten to the bottom of the seeds of resentment were planted when they weren't getting their love language satisfied, because we give the one that we like to receive, because we assume everybody wants the same one. Now you've seen there's 5 people, 5. And it's important to first find out what yours is. And mine is words of affirmation. Oh my God, I would give up so much in my life to keep words of affirmation, because that is just, it's my lifeblood. It really works for me. But if it's not the other person's and I keep telling them thank you, they want me to do stuff for them, or they want me to touch them, or they want me to buy them gifts, or they want me to spend time with them, they're not going to feel loved and cared about, and they're going to get resentful and start blaming me. And then I'm going to be resentful of, I'm giving all of this. Look at this. I tell them thank you all the time. Why aren't they appreciating that? Yep. And just this one tool can eliminate a lot of misunderstandings. You're so right.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've done this a few times because, I teach it so much. And so I know that for me, physical touch is like top, and then quality time is right below that. Acts of service, yeah, so what? Words of affirmation is nice, but it's like, that's the thing. All the love languages, we have them. It's more about which is your predominant, most natural resource states. So for me, I know that when I'm with somebody, when we touch, even just holding hands or just a touch on the cheek, that sort of thing, it's that, I feel love now. Mm-hmm. So it's different for every person that way. Yeah. So I want to drop into explaining, because I'm going to do it now after the break. I want to drop in a little teaching about guilt in a second, because that's going to come up as well. Because part of what happens when we get in place in relationships, especially where we start to resent or blame the other person, oftentimes what we then start to do is feel guilty for what we didn't do or didn't do right, because they may tell us that, or may just think it to ourselves, because we're looking at the situation going, well, it's not them, it must be me. Therefore, I'm in the wrong. Therefore, I'm going to feel guilty. The
Yes.
logic path into insanity.
Yes.
And I said at the beginning, and I'm going to explain this more when I break it down, but basically resentment and guilt are two sides of the same coin.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'll do it now since we're already on it. I was like thinking about, should I wait till the break? Let's just do it now. So the way that I explain guilt, the way I was taught to understand guilt, the way I teach it. Now, being Jewish, guilt's kind of a default state because we're raised with that. But I mean this from a point of view of the structure of guilt, is that we basically have an ideal vision of who we think we are. So ideally, most of us, we think we're good people, for example. So when we do something bad, that violates the image we have of ourselves being good people.
Bad.
The challenge,
bad.
Yeah, exactly, bad. Like we cut someone up on the freeway, or somebody cheats on their partner, or you burn something when you're cooking. It's like whatever it is for you that is the trigger. Don't say, "Oh, I'm a bad person because I did that."
Yeah.
That immediately violates the belief we have that we're good people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is two competing thoughts that can't fit together. Mm-hmm. So when you have a feeling or belief that you're a good person, which we all are good people, I believe, but we do bad things,
mm-hmm.
there has to be something in between to separate the two so they don't keep banging into each other. Mm-hmm. What we put in between is a thing called guilt. Guilt is a wall, so to speak, that separates good people from bad behavior, so we can still function. Because they're going on all the time. We wouldn't be able to function because we say, I'm a good person, do bad things. It's like the logic circuits blow.
Yes.
So guilt is a boundary we put in place as a self-preserving skill to keep us from doing that. Resentment, being the other side of the coin, is when we have the same thing going with other people. I would say we think that most people are good people out there, same as we are. They're good people too, but they do bad things. So the way we actually do it internally to wire it up badly is we start resenting them because what they've done is they didn't exhibit good behavior to match their good personage. They start doing something bad, whether again it's your partner who cheated on you or whatever they did. Even maybe some of your clients have gone through this, where their partner died, they blame their partner for dying as being a bad thing because somehow they shouldn't have done that. Mm-hmm. Like they had control over it. So recognizing that the resentment and guilt are actually safety mechanisms, almost like pressure relief valves, to separate good people from bad behavior. It's a benefit, but it's not workable because what it's doing is perpetuating the bad things, the bad behavior, or what we do ourselves or other people do. So in the work I do with my clients, and this is the big piece of the work I do with my clients, is this wonderful F word called forgiveness. Yeah. Because the only way to remove that wall of guilt or resentment from in between the two is by having some level of forgiveness to let go of the judgments of the behavior, because the behavior they did was bad because we judge it as bad. Mm-hmm. In the grand scheme of things, it's just behavior. But because it was a good person doing it, it wasn't up to their standard, so to speak. We then start judging that as wrong. And that's the toxicity we also do in our system. Judgment's a whole other thing about making a system dysfunctional, because it's a recognition. It's actually a psychological teaching, is that we can impact our physical health by judgment and anger. Those two things alone, if we don't learn how to resolve them, move through them in a healthy way, we're actually going to make ourselves physically ill. So beware of that. So forgiveness, which we can go into a bit later because it's a much bigger topic. Forgiveness is a method to allow ourselves let ourselves off the hook for the behavior we think that we did was wrong, or to let ourselves off the hook for the judgment on the person's behavior we want to judge somebody else on. Yeah. So that's the Cliff Notes version of how guilt and resentment work. But the blame is the piece where we put on top of resentment for somebody else. Usually, we don't usually blame ourselves. We usually blame somebody else. Although I guess we can blame ourselves, but still, guilt and resentment are the two underlying vehicles through which we keep separation from ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Really, such helpful analogy and good words, because I think we all need words to help hang our hats on when we're going through any kind of big emotional, because blame and resentment and anger and guilt are very big emotions.
Absolutely.
And I think that what happens too is that we don't understand the gradations as we're getting there. I think that's where resentment happens a lot, that some little thing will happen and we'll go, oh, it's no big thing, or, oh, we don't really let it go. We
Right.
don't really say, because what I want people to say is there a good reason? Is there a good reason that person did that? Not that it's good behavior, but is there a good reason because of their background or a misunderstanding or a miscommunication? But if you go down the train of thought of that I just lost, isn't that wild? Now
He'll come back. He'll come back.
I'm going to have one of those too, just like you did.
So if I can feedback what you were saying, hope you're
Yes.
back on course. You're talking about how basically it was the gradations, or how it was the levels of.
Yes.
Does that help you?
Thank you. Yes. I have this wonderful wheel that I've shared with clients, because I'll say, well, how do you feel? And they don't have many words. So I want to show them that there's like 15 words between mild irritation and rage.
Yeah.
And they never knew that. So if you have a word, and even like gradations of color, that it gets to be a darker red or purple or whatever color gets your energy going, to go, oh, well, where did it start? And what could I have done before I got to this phase? Or is it really this much? Well, no, maybe not. Maybe it's this much. It's still unpleasant and something you need to adjust, and you need to have a conversation with them or a conversation with yourself. But it's not Mount Vesuvius. You need to get to there. You've made these steps, but you aren't conscious of them. And I think that can help a lot with that blaming and resentment. If you go, well, I'm kind of irritated about this, and I need to talk about it, which really cracks me up when I'll tell people, if you have something that's bothering you, wait till you've had a really nice dinner and you're both really in a comfortable place, and then bring it up. And I just wanted, and they go, well, why do I want to talk about it then when everything's fine? I go, because who wants to talk about it when you're having this big upset? And it's
exactly
just adding on to each other. You're just going to end up with more layers. So if you can identify, oh, that really kind of annoyed me, or I think I'm pissed off about that. Wait, if you can, to a time when the world is a little calmer, and then bring it up in did you feel this way? And I'm kind of curious how this happened. And what do you think about this? And this is how I felt about it. And I know there's some exercises you probably use it with. You can pass a talking stick back and forth, or do the active listening that we've talked about, that we'll do examples for people in one of our talks, that it eliminates getting to that horrible place where it's ingrained and it goes on for decades.
Right. And a piece of that also is that we have this bad habit of letting the time bomb tick, 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 tick until we blow up.
Yes.
Like the straw that broke the camel's back. That analogy is like, how long do you want to put up with something before you talk about it? And for many people in a relationship, they're not willing to go, when something goes off course, they're not willing to say, honey, we're a bit off course now, versus you're off the cliff now. It's a bit late. But a lot of people wait that long to actually do anything about it, which is almost too hard to get it back from, because that's the thing about conversations, say talking the words out and speaking to each other. The sooner you can get to that point when something gets you off track, the quicker it's going to be to get back on track.
Yes. And so one of the things I've taught people to do, and right now, boy, they're really using it even more, is if you can't talk about it right now, there's, besides everybody's mad, or there's just no time, all the kids are around, or their in-laws are around, or whatever, then write in a date, a date time to be together, that you're going to come and have a conversation about it, that's scheduled at least once a week. It cannot last more than a week. You need to address it, because there's just going to be more stuff over and over and over that's going to keep piling on and piling on. And it's amazing how hard it is to get down to what was the original thing that often was a misunderstanding or a miscommunication. So I have to tell you a funny story. So I'm on a number of Facebook groups that are full of widows. And one of them's in this very nice relationship. I don't know her personally, but I saw the whole thing happen. She's in a very nice relationship with this very nice man. And all of a sudden he posted a thing on Facebook about, there was a moving truck in front of his house. And he goes, I've been waiting for this day to come. And she's like, oh my God, he didn't tell me he was moving. How can he do this? How can he not tell me he's moving? I'm so upset. And 200 in like 15 minutes, 200 people. Sucks, get rid of him. It's horrible. I can't believe it. So, and she tried calling him and he wasn't picking up his phone. And it was over. It was over.
Yep.
Well, you want to know what the bottom line was?
I have a feeling, but people.
Horrible, awful neighbor was moving and he was thrilled.
It wasn't him. Yep.
It wasn't even him.
This is the thing. We have this thing. I mean, there's a joke about how we have this. There's a cartoon or a picture, but a similar idea about basically the husband and wife are sitting the opposite ends of the couch, and he's like, he's looking glum and upset, and she's thinking the relationship's over. He's like, what's wrong? So I didn't do something. Did you not cook food right? What's going on? Meanwhile, he's going, second gear. There's something wrong with my car. The second gear won't work. It's like we don't communicate. So understanding the fact is that half this challenge we have in this idea of blame and resentment is we don't talk about things.
Yeah.
So the idea you said about talking, scheduling time on your calendar with your partner once a week to have what I like to call like a love talk or something we basically communicate where you block out maybe an hour, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes to say, honey, let's just talk about what's been happening and how we're doing. Because it may be like, this is so great, so great. Or it might be, this might need to change.
Yeah. Yes. And so we have techniques about that we'll talk about when we come back from this break.
Indeed.
Here's the fun commercials. Bye-bye.
See you soon.
We'll be right back. It's funny, my fifth love language is really gifts, but I like looking at all that jewelry. That's pretty fun. I have to say. So, we're talking about blaming and resentment.
Yes.
And one of the ways to eliminate piling on of resentment and blaming is to schedule a time every week to talk about what's going on. And I want to make sure that you talk about the good things too. It's not just, this is the gripe session, because people are like, I don't want to just complain. Well, that's not the point. Yes, it is good to bring up something. If it's only a week old, the chances are it's not going to be too big. Also, make sure that you've thought about, wow, you've been working really hard this week, and thanks for, figuring out how to get dinner together, or wow, you've had to have all those Zoom meetings and you still come and help with the kids. And that both people, not only if you're writing down things that you need to talk about to get it off your chest and to feel acknowledged by the other person, but also to go, wow, I've noticed and really notice the hard things that they're accomplishing this week, the things they're going out of their way to do, the things that make your life easier, maybe, that to say that. And if you make a point of doing that every week, because it'd be nice to do it in between as well, doesn't that make both people feel acknowledged? To have somebody point it out, even if you're not a words of appreciation person, which I am, it's still nice to have somebody notice that you've made an effort to give quality time, that you've made an effort to do the laundry or pick up your shoes or whatever the act of service is, that you're showing that I noticed. I noticed that you're doing stuff for our family, even if it's just a family of two, that you're making an effort. And it's much easier to hear if you'd like them to make some sort of an adjustment that's gotten on your nerves if you've said the good things first, right?
Absolutely. And on top of that, two of the other things I'd recommend, one of which is to really make sure that when you're coming together with your partner to share some things that aren't working, have some solutions in mind.
Yes.
Not requirements, but solutions they can possibly take on, because they may have better ones than you have. But at least you can see the conversation with, okay, this is not working, but I thought if we do this, or this, it will work great. What do you think? And it's like, actually, I think that one would be even better. So you can actually generate and build new ways of doing things.
Yep.
The other part is that for me is so important is by creating a foundation on which you have this basis to work from and come to, it really builds a healthier structure for your love to connect as well. Because what you're doing is not taking your relationship lightly, you're taking it seriously, saying we're committing to communicate once a week about what isn't or is working better and we can improve it. Mm-hmm. One of the keys as well is when you're speaking to your partner about something that's not working, the way you don't do it is, you did this wrong and it's not working and it's not going to have, you got to fix it and make it work better. What you start with, to be honest, if you're going to do that sort of where something isn't working for you, is saying, when you do this piece, I find myself feeling left out or feeling lonely or feeling upset or feeling judged. Can we do something different? Because that way it shifts it out of the judgment of the other person as to what is really going on. Because when we're judging somebody else or we're blaming or resenting them, we have an emotional disturbance inside and we're not acknowledging it.
Yes.
So to bring it back to understanding it's our own ability to change it is to simply say, yeah, I'm realizing I'm resenting what you did because I'm feeling upset because I'm not feeling like I'm being taken care of, or whatever that is.
Yeah.
So feelings are important to talk about in this context.
Very important. And to go along with that, to be clear about what are your feelings and why are you feeling them? Is it all that person? It might be what they did was a trigger and you have something else it's bringing up in you. Now you can say, wow, I know what you did annoyed me. I am feeling, if I use that scale, what you did made me feel like a 2 and I'm now feeling a 9. Wow, maybe you could help me get to the bottom of this. This is feeling bigger than what just happened. And I'd like to just run this by you and talk to you and enlist their help. I mean, most of us really like to help, especially if we're not getting blamed and we're able to make a difference and that it might prove something positive in the future, to be included in the conversation instead of you need to change and it's all your fault. Because, that is such an easy default for us human beings.
It is indeed. And by the way, what we're talking about right here is going to save you thousands of dollars in therapy, because most therapists will do that with you as a couples counselor. They will tell you, what do you say to each other? So what we're telling you now is saving you going to a therapist.
Yeah, you can work out how to do this yourself.
Absolutely.
And the key, I think the two big keys that we keep bringing up are address it early and figure out what your part in it is as well.
Yeah.
Why did I get so upset? Why did this bother me so much? And it might be that nothing has happened to you in the past and it did make you feel betrayed. It did make you feel uncared about. Then you need to say that. This makes me feel uncared about when you leave your shoes on around the house all the time. And it would make me feel more cared about if you would just put them, where would you be fine putting them besides in the middle of the living room? I mean, I know this sounds so petty, but I've certainly talked to people that have been really on the verge of breaking up, and it comes down to this toothpaste tube or the pair of shoes.
Or the toilet seat lid cover up or down, or the toothpaste cap going on or off.
Yeah.
Or the dishes in the sink versus in the dishwasher. Like that's one of mine. That one comes up a lot. It's like, it really is going to be, and that's why it sounds so simplistic. But truth is, those are the indicators that something's not working and you're getting upset about it. Now, there may be something deeper going on.
Yeah.
But it's usually the little things that really we start reacting so out of proportion to.
Yeah.
The toothpaste cap is this little thing, but upset is this big. There's something definitely amiss, because that shouldn't be causing that sort of issue. So there's definitely something else going on. So the good news is when that does happen, you go, hang on a second, there's something wrong here. If I'm getting upset about this toothpaste cap, what's really going on for me?
Yeah.
Do some self-investigation, and then you can start transforming what's going on inside to something much healthier, and also save the relationship too.
Yes. And what's so exciting is to watch one person grow emotionally, and then the other person grows a little bit more and a little bit more.
Yeah.
And they come out of it. I mean, I know you've found this in your work as well, going, I'm a happier, more content person, and I'm happier, more content in my relationship.
Yeah. That's a win. That's a win-win. Absolutely.
Stops being those little picky things. And then it's so amazing how they'll come back and they'll go, I'm really finding it so much easier not to sweat the small stuff.
There you go.
It's kind of like a miracle.
What a concept.
Yes. So, yes, there's definitely reasons to get mad, and there's definitely reasons to feel uncared about and that somebody's treating you wrong. It's important to acknowledge and go, this is crap, and
Right.
I want them to do this differently. Then you need to figure out how to say that to them. How do you say that to somebody? Let's say that's somebody that you're not in an intimate relationship with. It's a friend or a colleague. How do you tell them? Because one of the things I know that the really successful bosses that I know, they have those one-on-ones with their employees, and they want to tell them all the things that they like, and they want to hear the things that the employee likes about them, and then tell me the stuff that you think needs to be different and to change.
Right.
And they're willing to hear and enlist the other person to help them make a difference. So to hear that you can use these techniques in every interpersonal relationship you have.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think I want to go back to, because you mentioned earlier about this thing about how we don't sweat the small stuff. Well, the truth is also that there may be things in your relationship that are so much a deal breaker that you need to do something about it.
Yeah.
What we're talking about here is not saying you should put up with things that are so far outside your comfort zone that you want to leave. It's more about leaving from the point of view of being wholeness. Because again, this whole resentment stuff is what makes so much money for divorce lawyers.
Yes. Yes.
And that's another piece as well. Because the thing is, when relationships end, there are so many prices to be paid if you don't do it in a healthy way. So it's about physical health, but also about financial health, because if you're in a divorce court without using a mediator, but using a divorce attorney, you're paying so much money through the nose for what you could have done yourself if you were willing to look first. So what we're telling you is really how to preface that extreme result with a much simpler method that can actually either save the relationship or at least have it end in a more conducive and healthy way. Because yes, there may be things that will cause your relationship to end, and I've been there too. But if you can have a conversation that's, again, being practiced week by week by week, when your relationship is not going anywhere because the loving has ended or because they keep doing a thing you can't help or heal or work with, you can tell them, it's like, this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
And we've talked about it so many times, and I need to leave. So rather than in a place of like, you keep doing this to me, and it's not going to work, and I've had enough, and I've got all this upset and anger and rage, handle it from a place of wholeness. Because this whole thing is relationships do end. It's not like you should make a relationship last forever because that's the rules. Like, no. If a relationship ends, how are you going to walk away from it? How do you leave in a healthy way? Well, you actually have peace inside yourself versus resentment, guilt, and all these upsets.
Yeah.
So that's a key lesson.
And what a good lesson to learn for your next relationship.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And sorry if you.
No, you're going to finish the thought, and I'm going to change it. So please finish.
I was going to change it too, so you can change first.
Okay. Well, it reminded me of a story about when we were talking about the toothpaste, that I had a client that it was a thing. The toothpaste, whether it got squished from the end or squished from the middle, and we tried the little key thing so that you could use the key. It was never going to work. So they had 2 separate tubes. It was the most amazing solution.
Simple solution. I love it.
It was perfect. He squished and made such a mess, and she ignored it because she had her little pristine thing with her little key.
That's the solution.
I said, I'm so happy. I mean, there were other things that we were working on, but this toothpaste thing kept coming up, and we kept coming up with so many solutions. And finally, the solution was 2 different ones. Don't you love that?
That is, and that's the thing is, some of these, deal breakers, some of these massive things, sometimes there's such a simple solution to fix it. Crazy.
Yeah, it was so fun. It was so fun. The next time we talked, they're like, oh, it really worked. And she didn't care then because she didn't have to touch it and have it be all squishy, toothpaste all over it. And he put it away. He didn't leave it out all the time. But he loved squishing it. He'd done it since he was a kid. And
there you go.
Nice to have them stop being mad and having it interfere with their loving relationship.
I think that
have to be one person's way. I loved that.
So now I can see a solution for people who have issue with the over under toilet paper. You need to have two rows for that too.
Or two different bathrooms. You use the bathroom
Well,
and put the toilet paper however you want.
then you put your toothpaste anywhere you want too. That could work. Two different bathrooms, or at least double sink. You know, the whole thing. Anyway.
Yeah, and you can use the toilet paper the way you want in that bathroom. And if I use that bathroom, then I can't change it. I have to leave it that way. I mean, that could be such an interesting foundational way of coming to an agreement to be okay with something different. Because that is so important, because we're such human beings, and human beings are fallible and have lots of fail things about us, and we change our moods, and we never know what's going to happen the next time we're together. And so if you have these tools where you're like, oh, okay, that's you, and that's okay for you. And like I told Tony, I said, you can do all the, I want you to do as many practical jokes as you can with your son, because I don't want you to burst because you can't do them. And I said, I'm fine hearing about him. And so then it worked out well, because if he couldn't have done them at all, if I'd said, I don't want you to do them, and that would be horrible. And what kind of person does those? And I just think it's horrible. I mean, he would have exploded not being able to do them, because he thought they were an outlet for him.
Part of who he is. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So that's the other thing. When people are getting into relationships and you want to change a whole bunch about the other person, I say, no. Don't we all want to be accepted for who we are? We all do, but we forget the other person does too. And that you can certainly ask for what you want and need, and can they make slight adjustments, because you need to be able to do that too in a relationship. And then you say, I can't squish the toothpaste tube any other way. And if you can't live with somebody that squishes the tooth, I mean, really, if you can't have this in your house, that would have been my mother. She could not have had it in her house. It would have been hard on her. Mm-hmm. I get that. But for this particular couple, she was like, fine, as long as you don't touch mine. So when you try it out and you see, can you make adjustments? Can you use the continuum to get to a close enough place where you can go, I can accept that. I can accept that you're different than me, and it's perfectly fine. And that's when I was saying that the small stuff can be just tiny little bumps in the road, because they're tiny. They're tiny things. So the intention is to keep them tiny.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. That is such a foundational teaching about how relationships can work. Is like communication, negotiation, understanding, flexibility. They're all great skills to have. So this is wonderful to explain that.
Yes, I think so.
One thing I want to get back to, because I mentioned forgiveness earlier, and I'm not going to talk about forgiveness here as a technique, but a key thing about forgiveness. People have made assumptions, for whatever reason, especially maybe it's under the Catholic faith or some other teaching, that forgiveness somehow is letting somebody else off the hook. Because that's what forgiveness is supposed to be. Well, yes and no. Because yes, what you're doing is you're taking off the judgment on the other person, so they're no longer under your judgment, which is ridiculous anyway, because they don't feel it, we do. Mm-hmm. But the second part is forgiveness is basically allowing us to be free. Because forgiveness for me is having the key to your own jail cell to let yourself out. Mm-hmm. Because that person did something, it's already done. Not to forgive them, not to get off the hook, but to say, what happened, but I'm not going to put up with that again. I'm choosing to be different and respond differently. But what I'm also going to do is forgive my judgments for that behavior, so I'm no longer carrying the weight around. Because forgiveness is not about forgiving behavior, it's forgiving judgments. And so when you have a judgment, an upset, resentment, blame, all those things, they all come under the heading of internally carried burdens that we don't need to carry.
Oh, and you know this, I love this story. There were the two monks, I think. They were walking down a road and they came to a river.
Yes.
And there was a woman standing on the side of the river, and she needed to cross it, but she couldn't cross it. She couldn't swim. So one of the monks picks her up, and they're not allowed to touch women. That's part of their belief.
Code. Yeah.
So he picks her up, carries her across the river, puts her down, and the two of them walk on. And they walk for a few hours. And pretty soon the other monk looks at the one who had picked up the woman. He goes, oh, I've been thinking about this. I can't believe you picked her. You're not supposed to pick her up. Oh my God. What were you thinking? Do you know what kind of atonements you're going to have to make? And oh my God, this is so wrong. And he said, well, I find it kind of interesting, because I put her down as soon as I got to the other side of the river, and you're still carrying her. I think you're the one that's paying the atonement. I love that story. I love that story, because the guy had made peace with it. His part of his teaching was to help other people that were needing his service, and he could service, and he could figure out a way to do whatever he needed to do to
Yeah.
atone for that. But this guy had worked himself up into such a snit, and he wasn't even involved. So that is such a perfect example, don't you think?
Absolutely. So that, taking it back to what we're saying, is taking the idea that all that blame, resentment, and judgment that we throw out there doesn't affect the other person. It's all internal.
Yes.
So forgiveness is the means to let ourselves stop carrying that burden around.
Yes.
So yes, you may want to take proactive steps afterwards from a clear place to change what happened in that relationship, or change what happens in the future of that relationship. So they're no longer getting pushed back into resentment and blame. Maybe you can change their behavior. Maybe, no guarantees.
No.
Or maybe you need to simply realize that either you accept what they're doing or you leave.
Yes.
But at least you're doing it from a centered place versus like, I'm leaving because I can't handle them. They're too much.
Yes.
That resentment piece is getting in the way of you having a healthy relationship with yourself.
Yeah. And
in my work, especially, I'm so much about self-love and self-support that the more you can come into alignment with yourself and be at peace inside of yourself first, I'd be happy before you're in a relationship, rather be loving or upset, all these different things. Learning how to be loving for yourself first, and when you're in a relationship, that doesn't change.
No.
So healthy choices.
And I love that, because one of the things I think that happens so often when we feel all this blaming and resentment, we feel less than, we feel like a victim. Life is happening to us. Mm-hmm. Where when you take the responsibility of, well, I'm going to speak up for myself this time or next time, and I'm going to not let this happen to me. How empowering is that?
Absolutely.
I mean, there's the opposite right there. You either feel like a victim and you're helpless, hopeless, no power, or you feel like you have lots of power now. Power to forgive, power to let it go, power to do something more healthy in the future.
Exactly.
Yes. And then you don't have to pay that horrible price.
No.
Feeling like a victim, that's a terrible price to pay.
Exactly.
And there's Cece telling us we have to stop talking again.
Oh, such a fun conversation.
I love this conversation.
There's certainly lots to talk about. So yes, it's hopefully this is for some people, because frankly, if you get this piece, you can transform every single one of your relationships. Everyone
with yourself and everybody that you come in contact with. I mean, even just the person at the grocery store, you can get all upset about whatever the person at the grocery store did. You could use this very same technique.
Or somebody on the freeway, or somebody in the parking lot. In so many places you can use this if you're present to it. Just be aware and choose to love yourself first.
Yes, because it is such a loving thing to do. That's such a good point, Barry. It's one of the most loving things you can do for yourself. And then you meet the world in a much more loving place. And I think if you're going to be in a more loving place, you might have less shit stuff happen to you. Right?
Quite possibly.
I always seem to work that word into every one of our. Really goes. It's sort of like, where's Waldo? It's like, when is Christine going to say the S word? Oh, well, you can count on me, right?
Absolutely. So,
well, if this has touched on any nerves, because boy, I think this would touch on nerves, this particular subject, and you want to talk to either of us, the way to get a hold of me is my website is www.theperfectcatch.com. You click on the banner at the top that says what's holding you back from loving yourself, loving other people, and we can have a conversation about this to get to the bottom of if it's happened to you once or 1,000 times, let's have it never happen again. You can also reach me through email at christine@theperfectcatch.com, and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn, and which one do I always forget? Pinterest, yes.
Twitter, I don't remember. There's so many.
And Barry, please tell people how they can get a hold of you.
Absolutely. So my name is my website, and my social media too. So my name is Barry Selby. So my website is barryselby.com. On that website, there is a place called Let's Chat, which is the same idea as basically what Christine said, which is basically if you want to have a conversation and we can navigate what's going on, give you some guidance, some next steps, and maybe you can want to work with me. Let's Chat on the front page on the navigation bar is where you can get in touch with me. Fill out the form and get started there. You can email me if you really wish to as well at barry@barryselby.com. And on social media, they do change a little bit because, as I said before, my business page on Facebook is barryselby.author, and Instagram is the real Barry Selby. But on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Pinterest, and everything else, it's just Barry Selby. So you can find me, especially on YouTube. By the way, I have over 1,000 Facebook Lives saved to YouTube and talks I've done there, including a whole series on codependency that you might find valuable. So go to YouTube, look for me. So youtube.com/Barry Selby and check out my stuff. So I've got lots of it.
That's the other S word. And I thought this morning when I was in the shower, I thought, oh, the one thing I haven't mentioned is that people can sign up for my newsletter too on my website.
Oh, yes.
there's a link for that too.
They can opt into my site too. Yes. Duh.
I know. There's so few distractions at this particular moment in my life in the shower. So I do a lot of heavy thinking.
Me too.
Well, until next Thursday at 1 o'clock Pacific and 4 o'clock Eastern, we will see you again to talk about dating and some other juicy, wonderful subject.
Absolutely. So look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye for now.